Happy Monday. Welcome back to U.S. History. We're going to finish up Chapter 20 today with Roman numeral 5, the end of the war. And so your test will be on Wednesday, and we'll review on Tuesday. There was one of your classmates, an 8th grade student, who suggested that on Tuesday, for our review, we do Quizlet Live. And so we ran a little test demo with it. It worked. And so I think that's what we're going to do on Tuesday. At the end of this lecture, I'll go over how we're going to go about our Quizlet Live review on Tuesday, preparing for your test on Wednesday. All right, so Roman numeral 5, the end of the war. So we left off with Armistice Day. That was the ceasefire. That was on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in the year of 1918. And that brings us to the situation, the end of the war. How are these nations going to go about preparing a peace treaty that will end this, what we said earlier, this war to end all wars? Well, President Wilson, the President of the United States, he came up with this plan that he believed would best suit all nations. He said, I want a treaty that's not going to place all of the blame on one country or one side. I want us to all kind of be able to say, we're going to put aside our differences. The Allies won the war, Central Powers, you need to follow these steps, and then I think that we can achieve peace. But he says, I don't want to achieve peace just now. I want to achieve peace for the future. And so he comes up with this plan that we call Wilson's 14 points. Now, the 14 points, they emphasized peace for a post-war world. And kind of the driving point and the driving factor behind the 14 points was the 14th point itself. This 14th point would create what we would call a League of Nations, and that was the name of this group that he wanted to create, the League of Nations, which was a group that was made up of nations from around the world that would be able to diplomatically talk through problems in the world and discuss things so that it would prevent war. They could achieve things diplomatically instead of militarily. And I believe that this is the first version of what we would now call the United Nations. If we look in your textbook on page 408, we're going to kind of zoom in here. It said the crucial point to Wilson was point 14, which provided for the League of Nations. He idealistically believed an organization of cooperating nations could talk over problems and settle them peacefully, preventing future wars. And so this League of Nations was basically the first trial run of the United Nations. But at the time it was called League of Nations. Whenever Wilson went back to the United States after the Treaty of Versailles, he put up his 14 points and he asked the Senate, would you please ratify the 14 points? But the Senate refused. They said, we don't think that this League of Nations is a good idea. We don't think that it would actually work. We're not joining. The rest of Europe actually took on this League of Nations. Many of them in Europe ended up joining this group, but the United States, whose president came up with the idea, they themselves did not join. So that would be important for you to know for a test that the United States did not join the League of Nations. But the League of Nations was located in Geneva, Switzerland, and consisted of many nations from around the world in an attempt to prevent future wars. So let's go ahead and look at this treaty that ended the war. So the Central Powers and Russia were excluded from peace talks. The reason why Russia was excluded is because if you remember, the Bolshevik Revolution or the Civil War started by Vladimir Lenin caused Russia to pull out of World War I. And so the Allied power said, you left, you don't get to sit at the table. The Central Powers, the Allies looked at them and said, you lost, you don't get to sit at the table. And this is pretty unfair. If you think about it, whenever you have an argument with somebody and you need to apologize, it takes two parties to fix an issue between themselves. Well, what we have here with World War I are the victors of World War I saying, we won, you don't have a say in what we come up with in this peace treaty. And so it became known as what it says in number 1, a victor's peace. It was England, Italy, France, and the United States that really came up with the terms of the peace treaty. And what was sad about this is that all of the blame was placed upon Germany. Now, the 4 men who represented the Allied powers was President Wilson from the United States, Georges Clemenceau from France, you had David Lloyd George from England, and you had Vittorio Orlando representing Italy. And so those men, known as the Big Four, they sat down and drew up this treaty called the Treaty of Versailles. Now, you have to understand, France did not have a good history with Germany. And so although Wilson was trying to promote peace and actually trying to have a fair treaty set about, Georges Clemenceau said, no. We have a terrible past with Germany. This is our chance to really rub their faces in the dirt. This is our chance to really gain the upper hand. And so all of the blame was placed on Germany in the Treaty of Versailles. Now, Germany had to pay France and Britain for damages. We will call this reparations, payments for damages caused. And so I want you to understand the damages that they had to pay for, the reparation, it was in the millions upon millions of dollars that they were having to pay these countries. Now, if you remember, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, those were 2 other countries that were a part of World War I with the Central Powers, but they necessarily didn't have to do much concerning the Treaty of Versailles. It was all placed on the shoulders of Germany. And so now Germany, with their economy down after they've just lost this war, they're going to have to pay this crazy amount of money to the Allied powers. And this is going to take a toll on them economically, and then later it's going to take a toll on the morale of Germany. And so, like I said, this was unfair, and it would set the stage for World War II. And you might ask, how does it set the stage for World War II? Well, Germany, later on, and we're going to talk about this later, their economy, it takes such a toll on their economy that they later take part in inflation. And if you remember inflation, it's where you print off paper money that's not backed by silver or gold. And so that paper money is just worthless. And so Germany, in an attempt to pay off the Allied powers, they're just going to start printing as much paper money as they can. But this paper money is essentially worthless. And so they dive into an economic depression. And there's a lot of political unrest where you have communists that are trying to take over Germany, you have socialists that are trying to take over Germany, and you have the Weimar Republic, which is the current government there that's trying to keep power in Germany. And so the Germans are looking for someone to dig or to take them out of this economic depression. They're willing to look up to anyone who is going to restore the pride and the power and glory that Germany once had. And so that's going to set the stage for a man who's going to promise all of these wonderful things, and who's going to promise to bring Germany back to the top, and that man would be Adolf Hitler. And so let's go ahead and move on to the impact of the war on the United States. Well, number one, man's evil tendencies were revealed. There were a lot of men who fought in this war that when they came back, they were scarred. They suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. These men had seen people killed from poison gas, from bombs, from bombing raids, from tanks, from the new weapons that were out on the battlefield. They had seen gore, they had seen violence to an extent that had not really been seen. And so people were kind of depressed when you thought about human improvement over time. And people said, man's not getting better, man's getting worse. And so man's evil tendencies were revealed, and this really took a toll on people in that life, instead of being viewed through an optimistic lens, was viewed pessimistically. people were depressed. People did not really have an optimistic view about humans and their improvement over time. And so this caused church attendance to fall, and belief in God's word ended up declining. Church attendance dropped. People really kind of stopped just believing in God's word. And so we're going to see that there's a revival that needs to take place. And there were a lot of men who filled the void. And that would be like Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher who stated that God is dead. You have Charles Darwin's theory of evolution really take center stage, and people begin to grasp on to his false theory of evolution. And so that was the impact of the war on the United States, and we're going to stop there for right now. And so your test, Chapter 20, it's going to be over all of the lectures that you've had so far on Chapter 20. And you are going to need to study your Quizlet, which I will make for you, and your notes. So you need to study both the Quizlet and your notes if you want to be successful on this test. Now, let's talk about your review on Tuesday. Let's talk about your review on Tuesday and your test being on Wednesday. So I'm going to exit out of the PowerPoint here and bring up Quizlet. Now, Quizlet Live, if you remember, you were able to join a game from a remote location. We've tested it, we tried it out. And so in order to do this in an organized manner, I am going to set up 3 different game times, one for each class period. So first period, you will be able to join in on a Quizlet Live game at 1 o'clock. If you're in second period, you'll be able to join and play in Quizlet Live at 1:30. And this is in the afternoon, so 1 p.m., 1:30 p.m. for second period. Seventh period, you will be able to join in at 2 p.m. Now, if you remember, with Quizlet Live, you need a code. I will post that code 2 minutes before game time on the stream page, which is basically the home page of your Google Classroom page. So if you go to the stream page on here, I will post the code for you to be able to join in Quizlet Live. Now, how do you get to Quizlet Live? What you need to do is type in Quizlet.live. Now notice that dot is very important. Quizlet.live. When you go there, it's going to ask you to enter the code provided by your teacher. Type in the code that will be on your stream page 2 minutes before game time, and then you can follow further instructions that will be prompted by Quizlet, and we'll play for 20 minutes, and then your review time will be up. One other thing, if you have the Quizlet app, that is a great way to be able to play Quizlet Live if there's no computer available to you. And so you can download the Quizlet app, and then on the home page of that app, there is a search button down at the bottom of the screen, the little magnifying glass. You click on that magnifying glass, it will bring up a new screen that will say Play Quizlet Live. Click on that button, and then it'll allow for you to enter the code. Now, it may ask you first if you want to enter a QR scanner or QR code. Do not do that. You just need to enter the number code that will be available on your stream page. If you cannot play, whether you have technical difficulties, aren't able to join in the game, or accidentally get booted out, or have Wi-Fi or internet connection problems, don't worry about it. This is only voluntary. This is not mandatory. It's just to have some fun. I'm expecting for some problems and issues to come up the first time we do this, but don't freak out if something goes wrong with it. The Quizlet, I will upload that onto your classwork page here, and it will be material. It'll come up as material, and so you can click on that link and it will take you to the Quizlet. But remember, you need to study your Quizlet and the notes. I'm also going to post an announcement that will give detailed instructions, everything that I've covered here. I hope that you'll have a great rest of the day. Good luck on review tomorrow on Tuesday, and good luck on your test on Wednesday.